without wasting too much time, get into the nitty-gritty of this famous Section 135. There are lots of issues around it. Some of them had been created by the law itself. It's been through various amendments, as in there have been periodic notifications. The best notification so far is the one that came out as recently as 18th of June, and which made life and I'll take you through all of that in detail, which really made life simpler for us, let's put it that way, because it was a young act. We are the only country probably in the world that has mandated CSR. Most other countries do it voluntarily. We have some semblance of this in Saudi Arabia, where there is a 2% kind of a compulsory equivalent of a zakat on companies. But apart from that, India is the only country where CSR is mandated under law. And therefore, the eyes of the world are upon India. Everyone from the US to the UK is looking at India with bated breath to see whether it takes off or not. There's a lot of excitement around this particular area. Next to anyone that I meet at any social function, what are you doing? And I'm a CSR consultant. Heaven knows what they are doing there, but they are CSR consultants. So people have taken voluntarily VRS, and all sorts of things, and everybody is a CSR consultant. And all over some 18,000 crores. When I'm telling myself that, heavens, this finance budget, which Mr. Jaitley put out, he has put 80,000 crores on primary education alone. So what are we getting so excited over 18,000 crores or 20,000 crores, whatever? I mean, in the bigger scheme of things, just give some thought to that. There's a lot of excitement over some 18,000 to 20,000 crores. Useful, I mean, every penny counts. I'm not going to take that away. But in the bigger scheme of things, the government of India has set aside 80,000 crores just for primary education. So get your statistics right in comparison. Okay, let's not waste too much time. What has been the evolution of CSR in this country? It all began with trusteeship of wealth, the Gandhian philosophy, pre and post independence. Gandhi told people like Birlas and Tatas and Godreges, and God alone knows they took it very seriously, and they said the wealth that industry creates must be held in trust for the weal of this country. The Birlas and Tatas and the Godreges were among the companies who took that most seriously. It then moved on to corporate philanthropy, which was essentially checkbook philanthropy. Let's do something. I mean, we don't look good just making money, making profits. One businessman who I had interviewed some 20, 30 years ago unabashedly told me, I mean, why do you do this corporate philanthropy? And saying, you cannot have little islands of prosperity in a sea of poverty. So we have to share our wealth a little, otherwise, we don't look good. We look like capitalists. So it actually moved from trusteeship of wealth to corporate philanthropy. And then corporates decided that maybe we should become more responsible citizens. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we do which is not really good. There might be affluence, and there might be just let's act like good, responsible citizens. So it actually moved to corporate citizenship. This would have been more around the 80s. Corporate philanthropy was more around 70s and also spilled into the 80s. But towards the 80s and early 90s, we were in that mode. And then finally, people came across corporate social responsibility. But it was still something very esoteric. Half the world didn't understand it. The world as we know it has moved on beyond CSR. It has moved to corporate sustainability, and we are talking of meeting with GRI standards and ISOs, and there's a science to all that. And increasingly moved to corporate shared value. It's CSV. So in a sense, Indian legislation, the latest Indian Companies Act of 2013 has taken India 2 steps backward, because CSR has moved on. The world as we know looks at CS and CSV. But let's not get into all that right now. So basically, the father of corporate social responsibility is Archie Carroll. And this is his famous pyramid of social responsibility. He starts by saying that, right at the apex of the pyramid, that every company has philanthropic responsibilities. That is to be a good corporate citizen. Essentially, that's your first role as a company. Contribute your resources to the community and improve the quality of life. He talks of resources, which means human resources, material resources, even financial resources. But it talks of that being the first responsibility of any corporate. Then he says, be ethical. You have ethical responsibilities, that you have an obligation to do what is right, just and fair. And therefore, like all doctors take the Hippocratic oath, avoid all harm. If you can't do good as a company, at least don't do any harm. That he puts as the second ethical responsibility. Moves on then to the legal responsibilities, that is, obey the law. Law is society's codification of the right and wrong, and therefore always play by the rules. And then he comes to the economic one, that is, economic responsibilities of the company, and which is the base of the pyramid, the real foundation on which everything rests. Be profitable, because it's the foundation upon everything else rests. So that's how the Archie Carroll's very famous CSR pyramid goes, and I just thought that would set a good backdrop for all of us. So very quickly, what is the history of the new Companies Act? The bill was passed by the lower house, that is Lok Sabha, on 18th December 2012. It was passed by the Rajya Sabha on 8th August 2013 last year. It was at a time when I myself was very sure that this bill is not going to pass. The Telangana issue was burning out there, and I really thought this bill is going to lapse, and with the new government it will have to go back to the Lok Sabha. But I have to give all credit to Mr. Sachin Pilot. I mean, he was suave enough to see it through, and if you will see, it was passed on 8th August, and the President's assent was received as early as 29th of August 2013. Somehow everything was very convincing enough. Let's not go into the politics of how it got passed, but it got passed, all right? The politics we'll discuss, which is, it's getting recorded. I can't say beyond the point. So what is the date of effectiveness? Section 135 of the Indian Companies Act 2013 and the CSR policy rules of 2014 have been notified on 27 February 2014. So this is what, now subsequent to that also, even after the rules were notified, there have been certain clarifications that have come, and which have actually helped, because these rules were kind of worst piece of legal drafting that I've ever seen in my world. In the same paragraph, they say that you can do CSR, indicative of Schedule 7. That means in one breath you said, okay, so we can look at it liberally. And in the same paragraph at the end of it, they say, but you cannot go outside of this. And I'm saying, which one am I to follow, line 1 or line 2? So then they had to give one more notification on 18 June to say, no, you can look at it liberally. We look at all that a little more in detail. But both the rules and Section 135 have come into effect from 1st April 2014. In other words, like it or not, whether you are a private limited company, public limited company, foreign company, if you meet the criteria of net worth, profit, etc., which we'll go into in a little while, CSR will apply to you. It applies and yet does not apply, because there is that famous escape clause given, that if you are unable to do CSR, you have to just say you have not been able to do CSR. What Mr. Sachin Pilot had tongue-in-cheek said, we have a show or shame policy on CSR. Show you did CSR, or show to the world that you've been unable to do CSR. He very candidly said that. He's been on record to say that when he was Minister for Corporate Affairs. So let's look at Section 135. Section 135 has 5 sub-clauses. So there is 135.1, 135.2, 135.3, and 5. We're going to look at each one of them as carefully as possible, and then we'll go into the schedule, which is Schedule 7, and then we'll go into the rules. Let's have a look at it step by step. So who's affected? Most of you know about this, but it may be worthwhile going through it. That you need to meet this criteria. That every company, that means every company which is registered under the Indian Companies Act of 1956, or newer companies which will come under the Act of, so it talks of every company. Criteria: net worth of 500 crores or more, turnover of 1000 crore or more, or a net profit of 5 crores or more. During any financial year, now this financial year, so most people think that if in last year's financial year, it's not so. It has been clarified now by notification, it has to be a block of 3 financial years, the immediate 3 financial year blocks. But the language here is a little clumsy, so it says during any financial year shall constitute, what does it say? A CSR committee of the board consisting of 3 or more directors, out of which at least 1 director shall be an independent director. So basically, subsection 1 speaks about who is affected. Who is affected if you meet any one of this criteria? It says during any financial year, but it is a block of 3 years. Block of the last 3 years. What is your first responsibility? To form a CSR committee. That is your first job. Forget everything else. Your 2% you calculate later. Your policy you do later. First thing is you need to do this. If you are a regular company, 2 directors and 1 independent director. But of course, you might be a private limited company which is not hit by this requirement of an independent director. You can just have your 2 directors of your private limited and they can form the CSR committee. It's perfectly all right. You might be a foreign subsidiary. So you have only a local Indian representative. So that's fine. The Indian representative and 1 more person that you might have from abroad can be sitting on your CSR committee. So that's also, these things have been clarified substantially. Now, this is what I was saying. What does any financial year imply? And this has come in the general circular, which is number 21/2014, and it's dated 18 June. It says any financial year implies any of the 3 preceding financial years. Thus, for the current financial year in which we are, 2014-15, Section 135(1) shall apply to every company meeting the criteria of net worth, turnover or net profit during the block period of 2011-12, 2012-13 and 13-14. So it is the entire block of 3 years that we are talking about. Financial year that way is misleading as put under Section 135(1), and the circular of MCA has clarified that bit. Clear so far? Okay. What are the exceptions? An unlisted public company or a private company covered under 135(1) which is not required to appoint an independent director pursuant to 149(4) of the Act shall have its CSR committee without an independent director. A private company having only 2 directors on its board shall constitute its CSR committee with just 2 directors. And foreign companies may have 2 directors on the CSR committee, of which 1 must be the resident representative who is in India. So this, yes ma'am. Yes. The average, if in average looking at your last 3 years, that is if you, I'll go back to that. So you will look at your profits for 11-12, 12-13, 13-14 and you look at the average. In average, if you meet the criteria of net worth, net profit, then CSR will apply to you. And every time you will be looking at the block of 3 years. So when you move in the next fiscal year, again you will go back to 3 criteria. You will look at 2012-13, 13-14 and 14-15. So every year you will be looking at a block period. Clear so far? Average, aggregate, in aggregate. It's very clear. So, so this is where we were. Section 135 will not apply to every company which ceases to be a company covered under 135(1) of the Act for 3 consecutive financial years and will not be required to constitute a CSR committee nor comply with the provisions contained in subsection 2 or 5 of 135 till such time as it meets this criteria. Therefore, once a company qualifies for CSR, it must continue until and unless it does not qualify for 3 consecutive years. This again has been made adequately clear under the CSR circulars that have been brought out from time to time by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs. That means once you've been put into, and this is where again that block of 3 years and its average comes into play over here, that let us assume that in that block period you have met that criteria. So you have to have the CSR committee, etc. But in probably this year, you may have not met it. but yet if you look at the aggregate, you have to continue with it. So once you get into the CSR net, you are stuck into it for at least a minimum of 3 years. That is what this particular provision of the clarification from the Ministry of Corporate Affairs tells us. Foreign companies have also been included in the rules. That is, with respect to a foreign company covered under the rules, the CSR committee shall comprise at least 2% of which 1% shall be an authorized representative resident in India, and another person shall be nominated by the foreign company. Thus, foreign companies are also covered for their Indian operations, branches, or project offices in India. The definition of a foreign company has been given under section 242, and it says a foreign company means any company or body corporate incorporated outside India which A, has a place of business in India, whether by itself or through an agent, physically or through electronic mode, and conducts any business activity in India in any other manner. So this is under the New Companies Act. Even a foreign company has been adequately explained. The definition of independent director, wherever it applies, runs into literally 3 slides here. But essentially, an independent director means one who is or was not a promoter of the company or its holding subsidiary, who is not related to the promoter. There's a whole bunch of requirements that are there, and I'm going to skip through all that details and come straight to subsection 2 of section 135. Now, what does this part say? The board's report, the board as in the board of directors of the company, report under subsection 3 of 134 shall disclose the composition of the CSR committee. And it says, as per section 134.3, also details about the policy developed and implemented by the company on CSR. So subsection 2 talks about who is your CSR committee, and it talks about your policy. A policy is a grandiose name basically for what is your plan. What is your plan of action? And we'll come to the policy part in a short while. Let's look at subsection 3. It says the CSR committee shall, what does it do? Now here is the duty of the CSR committee. What is the CSR committee supposed to do? Formulate and recommend to the board, as in the board of directors, a CSR policy which shall indicate the activities to be undertaken by the company as specified in that famous Schedule 7. The second is recommend the amount of expenditure to be incurred on the activities referred to in clause A. So again, the CSR committee has to recommend. So it's a recommendatory role that the CSR committee, remember, all the decision making ultimately is with the board of directors. The job of the CSR committee is to lead, to provide, and of course when the report will be signed, then the chairperson of the CSR committee has to sign it jointly with the MD or the chairperson of the company. So that is one of the requirements. So it's not so kind of easy, this CSR committee's role, but by and large it is more advisory in nature. And the third duty of the CSR committee is to monitor the CSR policy of the company from time to time. It doesn't explain how it must monitor. I would think it would do it through periodic meetings, reporting that might come to them, and directions that it would give to the board of directors. Subsection 4, it says the board of every company shall. Now here is the duty of the board of directors of the company. The board of every company shall, after taking into account the recommendations of the CSR committee, approve the CSR policy of the company and disclose contents of such policy in its report, and also place it on the company's website, if any, in such manner as may be prescribed. By and large, if you put it on your website, that's considered good enough. In fact, one of the questions was asked to the ministry that, what if a company does not have a website? And the minister laughed and said, I can't think of any company that meets these criteria of net worth, profitability, and not having a website of its own in today's time. So anyway, so website should generally be good enough. I mean, looking at company websites, and very few have actually put up their CSR policies. Many of them are still formulating it, I know, because I'm advising some companies right now in formulating their policies, etc. So many of them have got it together but still not uploaded it. They are waiting for maybe everybody to get onto the bandwagon, check who's doing what and make last minute tweaks if they want to, etc. I'm not sure why they have not put it up, but And the board must ensure that the activities as are included in the CSR policy of the company are undertaken by the company. So once again, compliance is the role of the board. So the CSR committee's role is more advisory, but the actual compliance is for the board. So it's a responsibility of the board of directors. And then the final subsection of 135, it says, the board of every company shall ensure that the company spends in every financial year, at least, and financial year meaning in that year you will be spending that, at least 2% of the average net profits of the company made, and this is the language of the Act, sir, which you were asking for. In every financial year, at least 2% of the average net profits of the company made during the 3 immediately preceding financial years in pursuance of its CSR. So this is straight from subsection 5 of 135. Average profits of the last 3 years. This is verbatim from 135.5, the Act itself. Are you still in doubt, sir? Why? Yes, the 2% spend, right. So what is your doubt about?
Doubt is in terms of the criteria, whether you fall into the criteria or not.
That the clarification from the MCA said that.
So that's it. So this is only talking.
So which agreed. I agree with you on that part. And if one wants to get technical about it, you can say what matters is what the Parliament has passed. Any subsequent clarification for that matter, the rules are also not passed by Parliament. The rules can be questioned and everything can happen with it. But so I agree with you in that regard. But the MCA's notification subsequently talks about a block of 3 years. So thank you for that. Then it says, provided that the company shall give preference to the local area. Now here again it talks about preference to local area. So many people seem to think, oh, under the Companies Act, we have to do only in local. Whoever said that? So if you think that in your area there are 10 other companies doing all the work you want to do and you would rather do it in some place where there is hardly anything being done, you want to go to Jharkhand and do it, you can. Well, if you see a connect and if you really want to and feel the need, it only says provided the company shall give preference. So it's more indicative. Give preference, and it makes sense for a company to do things in its environment. But it doesn't mean therefore you have to work only in the local area. So the company shall give preference to the local area and areas around it where it operates for spending the amount earmarked for CSR activities. And finally it says, provided further that if the company fails to spend such amount, the board shall in its report made under clause O of subsection 3 of 134 specify the reasons for not spending the amount, the famous escape clause. So in the first year, I've actually had companies, I cannot name them for professional ethics, who says, so this is the first year, we have no history of doing CSR. So would it be okay for us to write that, we are still putting our act together? I said, yeah, if you don't feel ashamed about it, by all means you can do that. Yeah, we'll do it. We have not been able to. It's a matter of your company's reputation capital. You want to look like a fool over there? Great, you can do that. But that is what has been provided. So therefore, it said that it is mandatory and yet not mandatory. What is mandatory is disclosure. That you have to disclose what, and this is the other part. When many people say, can we do this? Can we not do that? This is the little bit of, well, as I said, Schedule 7 can be interpreted liberally now, the ministry has told us. If you want to experiment, ladies and gentlemen, the time is this year. Because as the Act and the rules stand today, there is no implication of a CSR audit yet. Nobody is going to audit your CSR work. So if you have done something in good faith, and you really think this is good for the country or the communities around you, and God forbid the ministry feels that that is not CSR, you have every right to say, oh really, that's not CSR? I'm sorry, next year we will not do that. But it will be okay, you will not be. What is your penalty? Your penalty is, and the penalties are huge. They run into jail terms and fines running into a few lakhs of rupees. But for what? Non-disclosure. Not for bad CSR. So if your intent is good, if you really think this is good for the society, for the communities around you, and you have been a little, let us say, liberal, what is the worst that can happen? The ministry might turn around and tell you, you know, this was not CSR, but they can't do anything beyond that. And I want to be on record in saying that. You want to experiment? This is the year for you to do it. Be bold enough to do it if you want to do it, because who knows, as time moves, the screws will be tightened. You can't do this. You can do this. You can't do this. You want to experiment? Do it in this year. Try it out. You might be setting a model over here. Sorry, I'm being very liberal when I'm saying that, but this is the position in law. You can be penalized only for non-disclosure, nothing else. Okay, let's look at Schedule 7, the famous Schedule 7. What are these CSR activities? It's been defined. Eradicating hunger, poverty, malnutrition, providing health care, including preventive health care. You know that the earliest avatar of the rules, it was only preventive health care. And a lot of NGOs made a big noise about it. They said, what do you mean by preventive? We do a lot of this. Like, Impact India said we are running this one and only in Asia, in the world, the medical facility on wheels. And say, okay, so healthcare also. So they tweaked this and included healthcare. So healthcare, including preventive healthcare and making available safe drinking water, promoting education, including special education, and employment enhancing vocational skills, especially among children, women, elderly, differently able, livelihood enhancement projects, promoting gender equality, empowering women, setting up homes and hostels for women and orphans, setting up old age homes, daycare centers, and such other facilities for senior citizens, and measures for reducing inequalities faced by socially and economically backward groups, ensuring environmental sustainability, ecological balance, protection of flora and fauna, animal welfare, agroforestry, conservation of natural, everything you need to talk about environment is out there. Protection of national heritage, art and culture. So you want to do something about the Gateway of India, fine, you could do it under CSR. Or the Victoria Terminus Station or anything. These are all heritage structures. Restoring buildings and sites of historical importance. So you want to do something about the Red Fort in Delhi, fine, go ahead and do it. Or the Ajanta, the Ellora, all sorts of things you can do under CSR. Setting up public libraries, promotion and development of traditional arts and handicrafts, measure for the benefit of the armed forces, veterans, war widows and their dependents. Pretty exhaustive list. Training to promote rural sports, nationally recognized sports, Paralympic sports, Olympic sports. So also nationally recognized sports, so you could actually be even promoting kabaddi and things like that. You know, it's becoming very popular even now, especially on TV. So, and of course the famous contribution to the Prime Minister's National Relief Fund, one of the best ways to do CSR, after that there's no reporting. You give it, you've made friends with the Prime Minister, or at least got into good books of the PM, and that's it. Again, it's up to you, your reputation capital matters. It doesn't speak of the Chief Minister's Relief Fund. It doesn't, so it mainly speaks of central government. Remember, it's a central piece of act. It's a federal law. It's not a state law. So contribution to the Prime Minister's National Relief Fund or any other fund set up by the central government for socio-economic development, relief of welfare of the scheduled castes, etc. Contributions or funds provided to technology incubators located within academic institutions which are approved by the central government. Now, this is a little too tight. So, when you talk of technology incubators, you might be talking even in terms of certain social entrepreneurs. But it comes with a rider that must be within academic institutions and approved by the central government. Very clearly, social entrepreneurs have not been really covered, but we have to see how we can work around all that. For example, disaster relief has not been covered over here, or relief during, but the ministry has again said that you can interpret Schedule 7 liberally to include even disaster relief, and I will demonstrate how. And rural development projects. So there are 10 points covered under what can be deemed. So the government of India has actually defined for companies what can be CSR activities. It's exhaustive and yet not complete. I wouldn't say that everything under the sun that we want to do is covered here, but it's fairly exhaustive. But if you say specifically, can I support social enterprises? I would think if the social enterprise is a non-profit, yes. If it is a for-profit social enterprise, question mark. Would you be hauled up for this? In the first year, my answer is no. You want to experiment? This is the year to do it. Got it? Right, let's have a look. So this is famous MCA's clarification, which came on 18th of June 2014, and everyone, including me, breathed a big sigh of relief when we read this, because it really dispelled a lot of doubts that we carried in our mind. It says the statutory provisions and provisions of the CSR rules 2014 is to ensure that while activities undertaken in pursuance of CSR policy must be related to Schedule 7 of the Companies Act, the entries in the said Schedule 7 must be interpreted liberally so as to capture the essence of the subjects enumerated in the schedule. And the moment I read that, I said, Eureka, this is good. Now, and they have demonstrated to us how liberal we can be in interpreting that. Let's have a look at that. So they said the following can come under promoting education. Promoting road safety. Whoever knew? Well, you can. Road safety programs that you might have can come under promoting education. Consumer education and awareness. This is straight from the MCA circular. Conservation and renovation of school buildings and classrooms. All this can come under promotion of education. So interpret Schedule 7 liberally. The following can come under vocational skills. Training to drivers. How do you like that? To drive safely on highways. You want to teach people to drive. I mean, that's fine. It's skill building. It's under vocational training. Whoever would have thought, but I mean, they have asked us to be this liberal. So capacity building for farmers, covering best sustainable farm management practices, that can come under vocational skills. Training agricultural labor or skill development. All this. So, I mean, a certain car company had approached me that they said, we set up a unit where we want to train people in, creating spare parts. And is it okay if we absorb them in our company? I said, technically nothing's to stop you from doing that. You are opening this institute for anyone who can come here for training. And if incidentally you also absorb them in your company, what's wrong with that? The Act does not. We have a certain dictum under law. One of the first things that we learn in law school, what is not specifically disallowed is automatically allowed. All right? So let's wait till the time the MCO turns around and says, this is not allowed. All right. Because they have said certain things like money spent outside India is not CSR. They've told us. So, I mean, let's wait for the time when so therefore I return to my mantra. You want to experiment? This is the year, do it. This is the first year. If somebody turns around and says, this was not supposed to be CSR. Really? We are so sorry. We won't do it next year. You can get away with that literally. Okay, let's look at some further things. The clarification allows the following under promotion of healthcare, including preventive healthcare. What can go? Giving medical and legal aid, treatment to road accident victims, provision for aids and appliances to differently able persons. So you could be giving crutches, calipers, etc. That all can go under promotion of healthcare. Trauma care around highways in case of road accidents, all that's covered under promoting health. Now, disaster relief. One of the first things we told the ministry was, I mean, you have not covered disaster. We can have tsunamis, we can have earthquakes, we can have a drought. So, well, they said, medical aid can be given, can be covered under promoting healthcare. So, I mean, during disaster, you can give medical aid because that's one of the things you need during, and yeah, I mean, take it under healthcare. Food supply can be covered under eradicating hunger, poverty, and malnutrition. Look how liberally they want us to interpret things. And supply clean water can be covered. Basically, when a calamity happens, what is it that we need? We need medical supplies, we need food, and we need clean drinking water. They said all three are covered under different heads over there. Go right ahead and do that. So you want to, in your CSR policy, set aside a certain sum of money for disaster relief. And India has disasters virtually every year. If it is not a snow issue way up in north, it could be a flood issue somewhere, or it may be a drought issue. You can provide for it. Basically, what is it that you would need in a calamity? 3 of these things, that's covered. You can do that. So as I said, this particular circular has been the historical one. It's been a game changer. It really, then it says CSR activities should be undertaken by the companies in project or program mode only. Now, this is the important bit. I still get companies who think that CSR equals checkbook writing. You know, you write out a check. I actually had a policy to review yesterday of a fairly big name company. Again, professional ethics, I cannot give you the name. But it actually in the policy said, so we will be making donations to XYZ. Heavens, it doesn't work that way. It has to be in program or a project mode. One-off events such as, now United Way is terribly peeved with this. One-off events such as marathon awards, charitable contribution, advertising, sponsorship of TV programs, etc. could not qualify as part of CSR. Now this is the don't. So as I said, over a period of time, MCA will continue to bring out circulars telling you this is not CSR, this is not CSR. So some of the things you want to do, try it in the first year. And if they have said this is okay, as in not said this is not okay, continue with it. All right? No issues with that. But now see, you already have this negative list, what you can't do. Okay, what is disallowed? Expenses incurred by companies for the fulfillment of any act, statute or regulation such as labor laws, Land Acquisition Act would not count as CSR expenditure under the Companies Act. This is also part of the circular. Then CSR staff and their salaries. Now this is, up till now we had been talking about 5% out of the 2%, that's gone. It's been liberalized. It says salaries paid by the companies to regular CSR staff as well as to the volunteers of the companies in proportion to the company's time, hours spent specifically on CSR can be factored into your CSR project cost as part of its CSR expenditure. So forget about this 5% of 2% of your CSR budget which can be used for paying salaries. You have, let us say, 10 crores as your budget for this year, and you want to appoint a CSR head for that within your company or outside. Where does the salary come from? You can pull it out from your CSR budget itself. And as in, ultimately, your CSR budget is your company's budget anyway, but you can pay it out of your CSR. And this has, that is why I said the 18 June circular has come as a major blessing. Foreign holding companies, it says expenditure incurred by a foreign holding company for CSR activities in India will qualify as CSR spend of the Indian subsidiary if the CSR expenditures are routed through the Indian subsidiary and if the Indian subsidiary is required. So in other words, you have an Indian subsidiary here in India, it's affected by 135, it has to spend, but it says, I don't want to, can my company abroad, the parent company or its foundation, give me money to do that? Yes, allowed. How better can it get? How better can it get? So, increasingly, you can say the MCA wants to promote CSR and it's liberalizing things extremely well. So, all these things that we were very worried about is getting smoothened out. So, relax, the CSR Act is not as bad as Grandpa told you yesterday, all right? Now, this is a clarification that in many states of India, as you know, that there is no charity commissioner. You know, like typically in Delhi, you can register a trust in half a day. In Mumbai, it takes 4 months or perhaps more. So what they are trying to say over here is that if you don't have a trust registration certificate, this is because it says that if you are carrying out CSR through any implementing agency, it must be either a trust under the Bombay Public Trust Act, which applies in Maharashtra or Gujarat, or a society under the Act of 1860, or a company which is under the old Act as a Section 25 or under Section 8 of the New Companies Act. So here this clarification states that in other states where there is no charity commissioner, don't insist on that certificate. If they merely have the income tax exemption certificate, that's also is a legitimate trust. So that's what this particular clarification is about. Now, contribution to the corpus. This is another good one. Contribution to the corpus of a trust, society or a Section 8, old Section 25, will qualify as CSR expenditure as long as the trust, society or Section 8 company, etc. was created exclusively for undertaking CSR activities, or where the corpus is created exclusively for a purpose directly relatable to the subjects covered in. So now this is one of the other things that companies, some companies, I'm not saying all, say that, I mean, oh wonderful, that's great. I mean, we'll set up our own foundation and we got 10 lakhs to give away. Right now we can't think of anything. Can we give it to the corpus of our own foundation? Yes, you can technically do that, but it must be set up for a certain purpose. There will be interest that will be generated on that every year. Are you going to do something with that interest? Are you going to be working on an education scheme that is, we'll give scholarships to so many girl child or to the disabled, etc. But corpus giving is allowed. You can give it as a corpus to your own corporate foundation, or you can give it to another NGO also for its sustainability of its programs and projects. So corpus giving has been allowed under the rules. Let's look at the CSR policy rules of 2014. Those were only the clarifications. So now this was the bad piece of legislation I talked about. Now just look at this. What does CSR mean, the rules say? The CSR will mean and include but not limited to projects. So it starts by saying CSR means but not limited to things under Schedule 7. And then read on, projects or programs relating to activities, etc., subject to the condition that such policy will cover subjects enumerated in Schedule 7. So here you say not limited to, in the second paragraph you are saying limited to this. How could we drafting pieces of legislation like that? It's kind of crazy, but this is verbatim from the rules. Now about the CSR policy relates to the activities to be undertaken by the company as specified under Schedule 7 of the Act, and the expenditure thereon excluding activities undertaken in pursuance of the normal course of business of the company. So if you will say that, you know, we have this big factory here, we work on 15 acres of land, and you know, we are conserving water over here, and we've put up kind of energy systems here, we have solar panels, wonderful, that's good, but that's not CSR. You put up those solar energy things and those lamps outside your factory gate, yeah, CSR. What do you do within your complex? Good stuff, but it's not CSR. That's probably good HR for you or makes sense for your company. Basically in your CSR policy, what are the key ingredients that should go into it? Essentially, you need to have a list of your CSR projects and programs, especially those that are relating to Schedule 7. You need to put in your policy, your modalities of execution. How is it that you will be going forward with it? Having transparent monitoring mechanism, and the expenditure and budget for your CSR activities. These are the 4 key ingredients as per the Companies Act that should go into your typical CSR policy. I have seen CSR policies that run into pages and yet don't cover some of these points. And I've seen really sketchy ones, one-page ones, which says that, so this year we will give 5 lakhs to Lions Club or something, we'll give it to Rotary, this, that. I mean, that's fine. You can also do CSR through any of these agencies, no taking that away. But let your policy be robust enough. See that it is aligned to your company's business interests. End of the CSR will fly if you see a benefit coming out of it. Whether it's for branding, whether it's for, but let's not get into that. Let me stick to the position of law right now. How do you calculate net profit? Net profit means the net profit of a company as per its financial statements prepared in accordance with the applicable provisions of the Act, but shall not include any profit arising from any overseas branch or branches of the company, whether operated as a separate company or otherwise, and any dividends received from other companies in India which are covered. So if there is any dividend income, because many companies sometimes have investments in other companies, and if you receive dividend from them, and if those companies are CSR compliant under 135, don't count that as part of your income for the purpose of net profit over here. So when you calculate this, don't include this. So how is net profit to be calculated? As per the rules, net profit should be computed as per Section 198 of the Act. And as per Section 198(5)(a), income tax and super tax payable should not be deducted while calculating net profit. And thus, net profit should be calculated as profit before tax, because this was one of the issues, that is it PBT or is it profit after tax? It's basically PBT, it's profit before tax. And also while computing net profit, dividends from other companies, as I said, which are CSR compliant, should not be included in that. Now, this came as a dampener, the Finance Act of 2014, where Mr. Jaitley on the floor of the parliament said companies must carry the government's burden. And this CSR, so he says CSR expenditure shall not be allowed as expenditure under Section 37 of the Income Tax Act 1961. And we really thought that was a blow to CSR, but it says, however, any CSR expenditure which is allowed as deduction under other sections, such as 35, 35 AC, ADG shall be permitted. What does it pave the road for? Try and do it either through your own corporate foundation having ADG, then you might get a tax deduction. In other words, CSR spending is not tax deductible. It's not a business write-off for you. You give it to your own foundation. If it hopefully has your ADG, you will get a 50% tax deduction. It encourages you, in a sense, indirectly to work with other NGOs having ATG. You will get 50% deduction. If the NGO is 35 AC, you will get a 100% deduction. And if they are into research and have 35, 1.2 or 1.3, you might even get a 175% deduction. That's of course like typically a BNHS has a research association. So you give $100 to them and you can write off 175. Typically for BAIF, that's the situation. So you can get a weighted deduction. So those basic deductions you can get, but otherwise CSR is not tax deductible. Certainly not under, so this is, yes ma'am. Yes. You have, this is a question, that's, this is how you calculate it, that's right. It's pre-tax profits. If you as a company are happy with it, then that's great. Wonderful, that's what we want. Most companies, that's what, when this came out, I would have thought that CII and the FICCIs of the world will run to the ministry. They have not. So apparently they are quite happy with this. So let it remain that way. You are happy? You are interpreting it correctly. All right. So how can CSR be undertaken? CSR activities shall be undertaken by the company as per its stated CSR policy as projects or programs or activities either new or ongoing, excluding activities undertaken in pursuance of the normal course of its business. Then CSR through your company's foundation, the board of a company may decide to undertake its CSR activities approved by the CSR committee through a registered trust, or this is where the clarification comes. It may not be a registered trust in certain states. So as long as it's got its 12A certificate under income tax, that should suffice. Registered as a society, or it could be a company established under Section 8, old Section 25, provided that if such trust, society or company, now this is the part, that if you are having your own foundation, it not be 3 years active. But if it is another NGO that you are working with, one of the criteria is that it must have been active for at least the last 3 years. It doesn't talk of registered for 3 years. So that's another interpretation one makes, that it talks of being active for the last 3 years. So that's the criteria that has been laid down. There is also scope for collaboration, that more than one company. So there may be a region where there are huge problems. And not everyone is an Axis Bank that has a budget of 1.5 crores to give away. So you have companies that have just 10 lakhs, 20 lakhs to give away. You can all pool your resources together to leverage the effectiveness of your work. It's something that is worth exploring, but it's going to be hard work to do that. But pooling of resources has been allowed and in fact encouraged under the Companies Act. What would not be CSR? CSR projects or programs or activities undertaken in India alone shall be CSR. So if you give it for, let's say, a natural calamity happening in Sri Lanka or Bangladesh or anywhere else, not CSR. CSR projects or programs or activities that benefit only the employees of the company and their families shall not be considered as CSR activities in accordance with 135 of the Act. And contributions of any amount, directly or indirectly to any political party, this is the negative list which has been given. Companies may also build CSR capacity of their own personnel as well as those of the implementing agencies through institutions with established track record of at least 3 financial years, but such expenditure shall not exceed 5% of the total CSR budget. Now, we had been talking about the CSR staff money coming out of this, but now with the 16 June clarification, this almost becomes redundant. You can still draw out of this also for capacity building. So you may want to build capacity building as in, financial expertise of your NGOs or reporting expertise of your NGOs. You can invest some of your money out of that kind of a budget. What is the role of the CSR committee? the CSR committee shall institute a transparent monitoring mechanism for implementation of the CSR projects or programs or activities undertaken by the company. What should the CSR policy include? The company's CSR policy should include a list of CSR projects or programs which the company plans to undertake, falling within the purview of Schedule 7 and specifying the modalities of execution of such projects or programs, and so on. So if there is any CSR surplus, you have to provide for it. I mean, you can carry it forward the next year if you like, but surplus cannot go back into the company is what it says. And CSR expenditure shall include all expenses including contribution to the corpus or on projects or programs relating to CSR activities approved by the board. So I won't get into this, including your CSR policy writing and all that, because it's there's lots of yarn on all this, and because my mandate is only to, so basically I'll come to the contravention part straight away, and which is under section 134. There shall be attached to statements laid before a company in a general meeting a report by its board of directors which shall include the details about the policy developed and implemented by the company on CSR initiatives. So this is the requirement. Under section 134, which precedes 135, if a company contravenes the provision of this section, the company shall be punishable with a fine which shall not be less than 50,000 but which may extend up to 25 lakhs of rupees, and every officer of the company who is in default shall be punishable with imprisonment for a term which may not, but what is that for? Non-disclosure, not for bad CSR. That's what you need to know. So the Act allows companies to follow the comply or explain philosophy of CSR, and the company and its officers are liable to be fined only in case of non-disclosure of CSR, not for faulty CSR. And finally, the statistics. There are 16,000 companies which fall within the purview of 135, and the spending is estimated to be about 20,000 crores in this particular fiscal year. Thus, at any point of time, there would be about 48,000 board members sitting on the CSR committees of these boards, and they would be in charge of policy formulation, monitoring, as well as, so that's how it is. So that's your, if you are not already confused, that's 135, the rules and the clarifications issued by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs. Now, if you have any questions, we'll be happy to take them. Yes, ma'am.
You already said that we have this 1 year to experiment upon on the various projects that the company has.
First, explain your experimenter. Deval will crucify me otherwise for bad teaching.
Yeah, so I'm coming to it. So the company would typically have a mission or a policy framework which will not run for 1 year but more than that, and therefore it becomes very critical to understand whether we are really touching upon Schedule 7. So the way I come from Marico Limited,
Okay.
so the way we are structured in our CSR front is that we are doing major of our CSR activities through one of our Section 8 companies. Okay, now this company
Set up by you, or it's an
set
independent?
up by me,
Okay.
set up by the company.
Set up by Marico,
Yeah.
yes.
So this company does not directly undertake the activities or the initiatives, but it in a way funds the agencies who are kind of a consultancy agencies who help some NGOs to scale up their business or
Right.
their objectives or their projects or the programs that they are doing. So it's not a direct funding help, but it's an indirect way of helping people. But this agency, that is a consultancy agency, is not necessarily an NGO. So it may be a for-profit association which may be helping the NGO directly, but the impact is necessarily a social impact, and it actually helps those NGOs to scale up in a very large way. So I just want to understand,
So
the
as you
engagement of a for-profit organization is anyway going to bring any kind of a
So
contravention.
if you wish to carry out your CSR activity through a for-profit, the only thing is there won't be any tax deduction for that.
No, for Marico, the way it will happen is we are.
You will give it to your
contributing
foundation.
Foundation, who is eligible. I mean.
So this is a little tricky, and this is not something that can be discussed in a question answer session, or where one has to really sit across this, apply the mind to it. But I think your policy has to be written in such a way that your policy as Marico Group is to work through your foundation. The foundation in turn will be supporting XYZ. Those are the actual deliverables you're looking for. And one of the deliverables is also scalability.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So you build in the scalability factor. No need to describe how that will be done.
Okay.
Alright? Because as I said, The way I see it, your CSR is not going to be audited. The Ministry of Corporate Affairs has not made that clear in the act or the rules right now. Right now, it's only disclosure of whether you're going to be doing CSR. I would say this is possible to do that. Your policy has to be written very, very carefully in this regard. But if your policy speaks about scalability, and then how you achieve that scalability through that foundation to do that, nobody is going to go into the actual audit of that. This is the way. So I would say that yes, subject to our looking at it more carefully and writing your policy, the answer would be yes, it is possible for you to do that. All right, but this is subject to working one-to-one with your organization to really ensure that you are compliant with everything else.
Also, I would like to quote another example. So, if the company is helping a for-profit organization who is doing something in the area of building hygiene or promoting hygiene in the society. So, say for example, there's a company which is setting up mobile toilets, and our company, which is a Section 8 company, wishes to fund such a company so that it is able to promote their model, promote their products, and thereby help.
So right now the rules say that you can carry out CSR either through your foundation or through other agencies which are either a trust society or a company. It has not specifically debarred for-profit organizations. So somewhere that inference does exist that probably you should be working only with non-profit bodies. But if we are to look at interpretation of Schedule 7 a little more liberally, I would say this is a yes and a no. One will have to be again careful in this regard. If you go strictly by the rules, then you have to do it through your foundation, which in turn can then tie up with this for-profit if it wants to.
Okay.
That might be a safer route to go.
Okay. Okay.
But we'll have to, as I said, this is not something that can be discussed in a bigger audience on a Q&A basis. All right, sir?
If I have a volunteering day, which the company by policy gives, will that volunteering day be taken as part of CSR?
CSR has been reduced to figures in India and under the Act. So if in your CSR report you want to also include the volunteering factor, yes, you can include that. But the question, it doesn't take away from your 2% spending that has to be done.
It doesn't take away.
It does not take away, then that's fine.
No, no. This is given as a policy every year, everyone.
So that's fine. So you can have that. So there are things that you will do as required under 135, and you might do a lot of things beyond 135 also. That can form part of your policy and your reporting later on. Are you trying to quantify volunteering time into the 2% is what you are saying? That has been allowed under the 18 June requirement. So what is the employee's time that is going out into the communities? That is what you're trying to factor in? That is
8 hours a day, if I have 40 hours a week.
I'll go back to that slide. It has been there. There you are. Have a look at it.
Volunteering hour. So are spent specifically on CSR. So if I have say 300 employees, of whom I have a day each, that is out of a 40-hour week, 8-hour day, and they go out, say for example, on a rolling basis to some maybe to a slum or a training institute to train somebody. So will that be considered as part? Can that be deducted out of CSR?
How is your company's accounts department going to account for it?
That would be something of a challenge.
Are you going to pay that 1 day salary out of your CSR budget? Are you going to do it that way?
Question, right? Yeah.
Yes. So if your accounts department wants to do it that way, then that's fine. You can do it. This is allowed.
Okay.
As it stands just now, this is allowed.
Right.
You can do that. Because this was one of the things that industry bodies had taken to the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, that everywhere in the world volunteer time of and employee engagement is a big thing. And employee engagement was very missing from Indian CSR, and this has brought it in.
Okay.
So yes, the answer is yes to you.
Okay. Thank you.
Once. Yeah.
In that 5% capacity building,
Yes.
which I think half of it is clarified, not the other half.
What is not clarified? What about it? One second, I'm still answering a question, yeah.
So this actually has been clarified, the first part, right? The own personnel, now you can take that into the CSR. But what about building capacity for other organizations? So
So you got a budget of 1 crore this year, let's say Axis Bank. So 5% of that is 5 lakhs. So it spends 5 lakhs on building the capacity of its network partners in understanding legal requirements, reporting, proposal writing. It can spend 5 lakhs for
but
that.
only 5 lakhs on
Yes,
that?
Only 5%
but-
out of its total
so then,
budget.
But if I give to the corpus, then they can
Whose
do whatever.
corpus?
To the NGOs corpus.
You can give it for that, but it must be linked to a program or a project, not for capacity building.
Okay, and say like where would organizations like Dasra and Give India and things like that, these catalyst organizations within the NGO network, where do they fall in? And if like, for example, Dasra will have us to sponsor this or to sponsor
I'll come to you, sir.
their philanthropy forum that they have every year, or their DSI where I'm...
So one-off events cannot be covered, as you can see from the rules. It says marathons, one-off events, etc. You can't give for that.
You can't.
You can't give for that.
Okay, and what about then the give, you know, for the DSI project that they have here, where you can sponsor someone to actually go and, can that come under education, or does that come under education of the NGO?
We have to
What
work
can you
around
say?
all of this. Education can be interpreted liberally, but within the academic sphere. You got it?
So this won't be counted then?
Let's apply our mind to that.
Okay.
Let me not just answer you right now for the sake of answering
Okay.
you.
No, I'm
Let's
talking
apply our
about
minds to
general.
this. Let's apply our minds more carefully. Your hand was up for a long time, sir.
Yeah, hi, I'm Karan here.
Yes, Karan.
One, I work with Raheja Universal, so we are a real estate company. And one question which I have 3 questions. One of them is EWS is a part of CSR now, housing for economically weaker sections. So, say for example, my budget is 5 crores, and if you're offering land for the EWS housing, say for example, we give the land.
Now,
to
what part of Schedule 7 would you
No, this
think
was-
this would fall?
It
Yeah,
will come
tell me.
under infrastructure development for weaker sections.
Let's look at Schedule 7. Where do you think this would fall? Doesn't look like it falls, what you are trying
No,
to
it does.
suggest. It does not. It doesn't seem to fall.
It has been announced as EWS can be a part of a CSR.
Where has it been announced? I don't think
it's-
there has been any
The last
ministry
Modi government has announced that the EWS can be.
but not under CSR.
Yes, it can be taken under CSR.
But the ministry has not given any notification. Ministry of Corporate Affairs has not given any notification yet. It's a
Fair.
proposal by the central government, which the Ministry of Corporate Affairs must bring it out,
Give out a circular and then it should come.
which
out
has
to-
not come as yet.
Fair. But just continuing with this point, for example, if the land cost obviously is high. So, for example, my CSR budget is 5 crores, and the land for a year, 5 crores for a year, and the land allocated is worth 15 crores. So, does that absolve me as a company of not spending for the 3 years, because I've already spent 15 crores in the first year itself, and I've done with my 3 years of spend?
I think I have not even followed your question. Has anyone understood
For
this
example, my
question?
CSR budget is 5 crores for the year.
Right.
That's how much I have to spend.
Right.
If EW said, if the circular comes through, that
Yes.
if a developer offers land for economically weaker sections,
So there's a value you're putting on the land.
Yes,
which,
there's a
which is
value-
to be matched with your CSR contribution.
for example, if the value of the land is 15 crores, and I have my CSR budget for the year is 5 crores, so am do I have to spend for the balance 2 years, because actually I've covered my mandate for 3 years?
We'll have to seek the ministry's clarification in this regard. It's not for me to give you an answer to that.
Fair. And
I'll be honest with you. We'll have
my-
to seek ministry's clearance on it. Carry forward is allowed. I mean,
no, it's
any surplus.
It's not about carry forward. I am done my spend. No, I'm done with my spend in the first year.
Sorry,
itself. That's
can
all.
you explain what you have understood from this? Yes. No, of course not. That's not allowed.
Probably
not
that's what I was
allowed.
getting. Carry forward or spend is okay. Fair. My second point is that when we say project or programs, now for example, I might start off this year by associating with X NGO, and probably we felt that internally that the work done by the NGO is not up to our standards. So will that be considered as a one-off? And
Yeah, I mean, there are times when an NGO can fail you, but
Yes.
you cannot be penalized for an NGO's failure.
fair.
As long as you have exercised due diligence, you have had some clear grant contracts with them in terms of deliverables.
Correct.
And there might be some reasons where, and obviously you will give it to them in installments, right? You wouldn't
Yes.
give them the amount
Quarterly
upfront.
payments, kind of.
So you can stop the next installment exercise. That's what any grant maker does. Some of the best grant making trusts in this country, including Tata Trust and all, have made bad grants. I mean, there are NGOs that fail. So that's all right. You cannot be penalized for an NGO that fails you.
Correct.
You cannot be. As long as you have exercised due diligence, you have had some clear MOUs with them, the clear grant agreement is there. Despite that, there may be failure in delivering.
Correct.
You cannot be held up for that.
Fair. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Sorry. Oops. Yeah, go on.
Noshir, a couple of questions.
Yeah, sure.
Some of them may seem very easy to answer. You know, to go back to your schedule, over here, schedule 7.4, ecological balance, protection of flora, fauna. Does that mean tree plantation comes in?
Of course.
I mean, that's one of the easiest things to do,
Of
right?
course.
So
Of
that
course.
comes in. All right.
Plant trees around your factory. It's good. It's
Not-
excellent.
yeah.
You can, preferably mango trees. You can get agricultural income free.
All right.
All right?
You spoke about
Just kidding.
second one on promotion of health and preventive health care.
Yes.
Would consumer awareness campaigns, you said, would come in, but would an editorial consumer awareness campaign,
Would what?
An editorial form
Advertorial form.
of consumer
Don't
awareness?
use the word advertorial. Say creating awareness about consumer.
Yeah, but through through a hoarding outside on the.
Now that, as you know,
because
that
the audience over there becomes different. Because the law also begins to say that the audience has to be the underdeserved or the rural population.
one-off events such
No,
as
it won't be
marathon,
one-off. I would say a 6-month-old project.
sponsorship of TV programs. and,
No,
okay,
this
that's,
is not that.
yeah, it's more like awareness building advertisements is what
Right.
you're saying.
Yeah. So I could use the newspapers, I could use the outdoor hoarding, and I could say awareness on
as I
maternal
said,
and child health.
You won't be fined 25 lakhs, nor will you go to jail for that. If the ministry tells you you should not be doing that, say sorry, I will not do it from next year. Sorry, I'm giving you, but this is the advice I would give you. You want to do it? Try it out.
Okay. And
Your intent is good. You're trying to create consumer
but my
awareness.
audience is not the rural audience, right? Because there, I think, is a caveat that your CSR activities should be targeted towards the undeserved or the underdeserved, as it says.
The
Because
environment
yeah.
is for everybody.
No, but
Well-
my editorial campaign would be for someone who reads, right? Who's a little literate, because it won't. I can't.
It's
do
for
a-
the literate audience. is
Yes,
what you're trying to
but
say.
the issue remains the same. Say a maternal and child healthcare issue is also in the urban.
It all
cells.
depends on your
Right.
company's risk-taking.
Yeah, appetite that one would
potential.
have. And if you could go back to where you said about the foreign company and the subsidiary.
Yeah, what about that? Was it here? Anyway, what about
Well,
them?
so does it mean having a subsidiary, or does it mean if my company is listed, or if it is a holding company, is it the same, or is that to be a subsidiary?
Any kind of, the foreign company can be a subsidiary, it can be a holding. The holding company is of course abroad.
Yeah, but it could be a listed company also. Then also
Absolutely.
it can.
Absolutely.
And if I were to bring you on board to consult us, would your fees be taken as a CSR fee?
Yes, you can take it from the 5% budget.
That's it.
Absolutely. This is how I am making my money, no?
Education, it has to be interpreted from an academic perspective, but here we at Marico are doing an initiative which is recognizing innovation in India. So we kind of give awards to people who have given good innovation, demonstrated good innovation.
But again, see, awards and all is not specifically covered, right?
But this is not
One-off
one-off.
event.
So this is happening over the years. So this has been happening over the last few years, and this is not a one-off event which would.
Is
have
it a
to
big
happen.
budget involved over here? Because what I'm saying is, why do
Kind
you
of.
want to fit everything into the CSR budget?
Kind
Why
of.
wouldn't a company do it outside of its CSR budget if you're so passionate about it?
Yeah, I
Sorry,
agree.
I'm turning the question around.
No, I agree, but I just-
Everything we are now trying to fit within a CSR budget. Isn't it true?
Yeah, but I
If
was
you're
saying-
passionate about something, try to do a few things outside of your CSR budgets also.
Yeah, I completely agree to that. But
Although accounts won't let you do that, they'll try to see why don't you take everything from here.
But is it to be interpreted as a purely academic education, or is it beyond that?
No, this is based upon our dialogue which we have had in the past with the ministry, but then the entire ministry has changed with the new government. So I'll be very honest, I have not had much dialogue with the new government. With the old government, when this was going on, I had intense dialogues with the MCA and all its other agencies. But since the new regime, I've had no dialogue. So I really don't know what is the mood of the current government in this regard. So I'll be honest with you. Right now, I don't know what is the mood. But at that time, the mood was more towards academic institutions.
Okay.
But it could change now.
Okay. Just one more question on this thing. There are many companies who are basically more so in the FMCG industry, where they are creating the CSR through brand initiatives. So like part of the proceeds of certain products that they are selling in the market goes into a charity or a contribution towards some
Cause-related
projects,
marketing.
cause-related matters.
Right.
So
What about it?
Does that fall under the negative list of relating to the core?
Of course
normal
not.
course
That's
of
part
business?
of your marketing strategy. I mean, how can it become CSR? It's purely your PR function. So you buy a kilo of my tea and 1 rupee goes to so and so charity. That's a cause-related thing. You buy a detergent and it supports somebody's education. It's your marketing and communication strategy. It has nothing to do with CSR.
Okay.
Let's get candid about all these things. That most of these companies who are doing this are doing it as part of their PR. I don't think their heart is into that. Okay, some of them may have it. Let's be charitable.
Just want to ask one question. Since there is a clause that monitoring and evaluation needs to be done, and you have just mentioned that due diligence also needs to be done. So for every NGO partner, do we have to follow a due diligence process?
It can be as basic as possible, or depends upon. So if you're running a project running into lakhs of rupees, maybe it may be more elaborate. But if it's a startup NGO, you also are just starting up, it may be a very basic one. That means, are you registered? I mean, do you at least have an accounts policy here? So it all depends. I mean, due diligence processes can be simple to elaborate.
Okay.
It depends upon oftentimes the area. So you might be working with district level NGOs who are just about managing to who are just about putting their ends together. And I think expecting too much of them might be disastrous. They would just run away from you. Baba, we can't, I mean, we'll go to somebody else, I mean, who will give us the money. So, so don't frighten your NGOs also with too much due diligence. I mean, look at it. I mean, be flexible, let me put it that way. As Axis Bank also said, we do it in a phased manner, if you heard them. So do it in a phased manner. Don't scare your NGOs also. Half the time NGOs are scared of companies, let's face it. I've dealt more with NGOs than companies, and I know it. They're scared of companies. They think they ask a lot out of the NGOs. And of course, I tell the NGOs also to live up to the expectations of the companies, but sometimes it can be very inundating for the rural and district level NGOs. That much I can tell you.
One more question. You, while you were presenting, you said that any company which is training giving vocational skills or something, they can absorb back those trainees. So they are still considered as CSR, because I was under the impression
It is
that
incidental. So here is a company that is in the business of manufacturing cars. And I'm consulting with 2 such companies in Pune who say that we want to provide them with basic mechanical skills, to put things together or to fabricate things and all that. And supposing we do that, just because you give them training, it doesn't mean they will necessarily be absorbed by your company also, because your company also has an HR policy in place. They must meet despite all the education you gave them, they may still be incompetent for your company. So there's no guarantee, but if incidentally they get absorbed in your company, that's not bad CSR.
But maybe if the company is doing it purposely to address the problem of skill gap.
So over time, the ministry might do that, but as of the moment, this is allowed.
Okay.
Exactly. What I'm trying to say is, do not stretch CSR to a point where government will tighten the screws on you. That is the point. Don't stretch it beyond the point. This is what even our NGO sector had often been doing, and that is why NGOs cannot have business income beyond 25 lakhs of rupees, because now everybody is setting up NGOs. Why? Because it's tax exempt. Rank commercial organizations, but we want tax exemption. So tighten the screws. When we'll start playing around with CSR, you will have all these legislations coming. So don't stretch the government beyond the point. Don't try to fit everything within the CSR budget, including your PR thing. It will now go into your CSR budgets. Be reasonable. That's my appeal. The trouble is the government tightens the screws on you when you start taking liberties with the law. That is a fact. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Noshir, so you talked about carry forward of that budget. So say, for example, I have 100 rupees to spend this year. I could spend only 50 rupees. Balance 50 rupees, does it necessarily get out of my balance sheet, or it can just remain over there as a fund?
It depends. You might want to show it as a liability in your balance sheet, or otherwise just allocate it, get it out of your thing, and you just create a separate fund. That is why most companies are now increasingly going for a foundation, because it takes that headache away.
Right, but it's not mandatory in a way, right?
It's not mandatory. But most companies are looking at having their corporate foundation as now a desirable thing. I won't say essential, but desirable for sure, because it just takes away so much burden. So I got a little surplus left, I'll put it in the corpus of my foundation. Why? For long-term sustainability of my CSR projects. Simple as that. It makes sense for companies to set up their own foundations now. It actually makes sense.
My second question is, suppose there is one foundation which is catering to various group companies. So in terms of creating CSR policies, in a way foundation will have only one policy or one mandate.
The foundation need not have any policy. So there is a group policy that you will put up on your website, and each of the company from the group, you may be having 5 groups. Each of them must have a policy of their own, which is in compliance with the group policy. You understand? So there is a group policy, because see, whenever you have a group of companies, you do not have individual websites for all those groups, right? So there's a group policy which can be uploaded on the website. But each of these companies in the group which are meeting the criteria of 135 must have its own CSR in place, its own policy in place, and it must do its own individual reporting.
Right, but that individual reporting, so how does it happen? Because there is no particular project, that company is actually undertaking. It's a part of the
group project. It is all being done through the foundation.
Correct. So how does it
get
documented?
This is why the policy must be written in a very clear manner. You have no idea how many companies have come to me saying, can you give me a CSR policy template? And I said, you think this is a cut and paste job, my friend? Actually, there are companies I know who think CSR policy is a cut and paste job. So if you'll give me so-and-so company's policy, I'll morph the language a little and it becomes my policy. Simple. Heaven's sake, I mean, policy, you have to give thought to it. Why you want to do it? How is it aligned to your business interests? So CSR policy writing is not a cut and paste job. If it was so easy, you know what I mean? Which is what?
So it's
so you have your group companies which will work through your foundation.
Correct.
That's fine. So your policy says that we are focused hypothetically on education, and all our educational initiatives will be through our company's foundation, which has been established in the year so and so, and it will carry out. Then the foundation in turn, and this all needs to enter your policy. That how is the monitoring and evaluation process going to go? Who in the foundation reports to the CSR committee? Who in the CSR committee will then report to the board? And how will the reporting take place in the annual report of the company? Do you realize now how important the policy is? It's a think through process. It cannot be done in a day. It takes weeks. And there are companies who still think they can do a cut and paste job. Give me somebody's policy and I'll make my policy accordingly. It doesn't work that way.
But the 5 companies in a group can have one policy.
I've done that. In Pune, I've done it for the Forbes Marshall Group. There are 5 companies together. I'm doing it for Olican right now. There are, I think, 4 or 5 of these companies again. It's a group policy. But each company will then have its own CSR committee in place, and it will have its own adopted policy, which is part of the group policy. It's possible to do that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Ma'am, do you think that answers her question, or you are still in doubt? Sort of. I'm disappointed. All right, great. Anyone else? So I can see all the NGOs migrating to the corporate world. Welcome to the corporate world. What questions have you around CSR beyond asking them for money? I think half of them come only because of that. They think there's a Niagara that is over there. Let's put a bucket under it and get the money. It's not going to come. As I was just telling them that it's 20,000 crores. The government of India has set aside 80,000 crores just for primary education. Where's your 20,000 crores in the scheme of things? It's chicken feed comparatively. Don't get it. Okay, stay excited, but don't expect too much. Yes, sir.
So does the entire fund needs to be spent in the same year?
Sorry?
Does the
Entire CSR amount? No. In fact, it provides for carrying over surplus in the next year. So if you have been unable to spend, it cannot go back into your company. It must be set aside for using it in the next year.
Okay.
Of course, of course, of course. That's a matter of basic accounting. It's a matter of basic accounting. And that is why I repeat that any company having its own foundation will stand to advantage. So you got a surplus, you always have the option to put that surplus as a corpus into your foundation. Simple. It's a capital receipt for your foundation. It's one of those, I'm letting out all the tips today. I'm going to lose all my consultancies. Next. Who else? I thought everybody was so enthusiastic. What happened? The NGOs came and scared you all? Okay, yes ma'am.
See, now there are intermediary organizations like who validate the non-for-profit organizations and help them to connect with the corporations to get the funding.
Such as Dasra.
Yeah, Dasra, CAF in India. Yeah. So, what value addition these organizations can make in getting CSR funding? Many organizations.
To make the connect, obviously. I mean, so it's a platform.
Is there any criteria for validating the NGOs, or corporations are defining any criteria, or something is happening like that?
I'm told now CRISIL is getting into the act of rating NGOs. They have almost put something together. That's what I heard last. I'm not very sure how far they have moved, but CRISIL is putting their act together in rating NGOs. That's what I was last heard by me. I'm not sure how far they have moved in that direction. But lots of people are going to get into this rating game and things like that, which partly scares me also, because I think the way they have been rating companies, I don't think they can use the same criteria for NGOs. I'm sorry, I'm going to be candid here. It's very difficult putting those criteria down to NGOs that are working in diverse conditions and with all kinds of other challenges. You cannot use that corporate model for NGOs. And I'm a bit of an old-fashioned person in this regard.
Thank you.
Yes.
So when you say it is better that one should have a foundation set up, does that foundation need to, or a trust or a company or a society, does that need to be set up where your registered office is?
Not necessary.
Or it can be set up in any jurisdiction?
Wherever it makes sense for your company. So I mean, if you are a Delhi-based company, it makes sense that you set up your foundation in Delhi. Or if you're Mumbai-based, then it makes more sense that you would be. But having said that, you may be a company operating in Bombay, but decide to create a trust in Delhi, that's fine. I mean, it's because end of the day, your objective there should be all India. That's the important thing, that you will, as a foundation, and be very clear what your foundation wants to do.
Right. I'm just asking because since you just said that setting up a trust in Bombay may take more than 4 months.
Yes, it does. And in Delhi, you can do it in half a day.
Exactly.
Because there's no charity commissioner there.
Yeah. So that's technically allowed.
Sorry?
That's technically allowed.
Technically, of course it is allowed. Of course it is allowed. So what you do in Delhi is you create a trust deed, you go to the sub-registrar's office, register the document, and that same evening you can apply for your 12A exemption with the income tax department, because there's no authority that registers you as a trust in Delhi, or for that matter in several states in this country. Only Western India has got a trust act in place. Bombay, that is Maharashtra, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan.
Madhya Pradesh as well?
Madhya Pradesh definitely has. Yes, ma'am.
If the trust is or a society is registered in Delhi, can they be able to work in Bombay or any other
Of course,
state?
of course.
Yeah.
But let's stick to CSR. Let's not get into NGO questions now.
Okay,
Yes,
I
ma'am.
believe that the CSR allows companies to fund the corpus of an NGO.
Yes, it does.
In that case, what are the kind of impact investment? Because, for example, an organization like ours, Sneha, works in multiple areas: malnutrition, maternal health, etc. So, what kind of impact assessment can we present to a corporate? Could it be a combination of different?
First of all, the corpus has to be substantial enough to generate a revenue every year to sustain or scale your activities. I would say that let's not get too carried away with this corpus giving. Corpus giving in the end kills initiative. You know, people become complacent. I've got a corpus to rest on. Why do I work further on this? So, corpus is something that should be discouraged or used discreetly. Even the best known foundations today don't give you for corpus at all. They only give you when they, you've done good work for 2 grant cycles of 3 years each, and then you feel that okay, let's give you a corpus now to sustain what you have started. But an initial NGO getting a corpus may sometimes be a bad idea. So everything is subjective, let me put it that way.
Doesn't it, one of the problems that NGOs have, they want money, say, for building research capacity or even capacity building of staff, etc. Now,
that is also allowed under the CSR rules, 5% out of your CSR budget.
But it's
so you got a 1 crore budget, like Axis Bank this afternoon said they have a 1 crore CSR budget. So they have 5 lakhs already for capacity building for NGOs. Straight away they can use that 5 lakhs without any questions to build capacity for Sneha, let's say technically. So you might approach Axis Bank and say, we need something for capacity building for whatever is capacity building as defined by you, and they might be able to fund you in case you are their partner. All right? Yes, anyone else? Differentiate between?
How do you define where the boundaries of capacity building? Right now you said out of 100 crores, 5 lakhs is what can be spent on
capacity building.
On capacity building. And you said capacity building of Sneha, for example. So what all will get included if you have to do
capacity building may, let's say for Sneha, it may be their marketing skills, it may be their financial skills, it may be, they might be struggling with some accounting needs, basically budgeting, cash flow. You have no idea about the host of things NGOs struggle with. Most of them struggle with all these kinds of things. They might have wonderful products, but they don't know how to package it. They don't know how to market it. Capacity building can come into all that. Capacity to...
So basically what we are saying, because, at the end of the day, the funding is all fungible in that sense, right? When we fund an organization, NGO, so internally they have to maintain as to what is actually spent on the ground on the project, which is the money actually which goes into the project, and the money which is spent on their administrative capability. So is that what you define
No,
as
admin
capacity
expense
building?
is not capacity building.
Admin
is a totally different thing.
That's what. So what is the thin line of difference between capacity building,
capacity building is
and an
the
administrative
NGO
expense?
enhancing its own skills, and admin would be the salaries that they are paying and all those.
Yeah.
That would be the difference.
So if they have to go to an expert and seek an expert opinion or expert, to help them with a strategy, for example.
So paying the expert can be capacity building.
It can be kept. So I think somewhere, I think that.
So you are underwriting the cost of a marketing expert to then work with Sneha to help them with their marketing. Yeah, that's capacity building for them.
But if that expert is an ongoing retention basis, then obviously it will not be
well,
capacity
it's restricted to 5% out of your total CSR budget, right?
Yeah, that's
so
fine. But the point is the nature of expense, what will qualify for that 5% is what is important.
So basically enhancing skills of the organization's staff, and as I said, capacity building is for the own company also. So let us say you as a company
that I understand. Yeah. Me as a company, if I have to
have a CSR head and you want to train the CSR head to have a better understanding of the NGO sector, you can use that.
Or seek services of a research firm.
Absolutely.
Research firm, I pay for it, and that comes under that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But when it comes to paying to an NGO, funding an NGO, and then splitting that into what goes into capacity building, and I think that's.
Remember, it's a young piece of act. This is the first year of implementation. People are going to falter. People are going to make mistakes. and it will be more than tolerated, let me assure you. We are the only country in the world that has made CSR mandatory. And the Ministry of, I repeat, that what has been made mandatory is disclosure of CSR. There is no provision for auditing CSR. So if you make mistakes, or rather if you want to make mistakes, the year is now. Be experimental now. Because over time there will be negative lists. This is not CSR. This is not CSR. So this year, try it out if you want to, and this is my appeal to the companies. Be as experimenting as you can, but within reasonable norms. Yes, sir.
Does wildlife conservation fall under CSR?
Ecology.
Environment?
Under environment, ecology, it would fall under that, yes. It would fall under that. So if we are to look at Schedule 7, then you would come over here. Ensuring environmental sustainability, ecological balance, protection. So saving the tigers would sit over here squarely. All right? Okay. So Project Tiger would fit in over here.
Fantastic.
So BNHS, everyone, field day. If you partner with a BNHS, it's a 175% deduction for you under 35(1)(2).
Correct.
Think about it. When CSR is non-tax deductible, it helps to work with such kind of organizations. Sorry, I'm not a marketing expert for them. Huh? They don't pay me any agency fee for that.
No, I'm glad. I'm glad you're promoting them.
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
When you say that there is a 5% limit on capacity building of the NGO, does it technically include also capacity building initiatives for the communities which we...
Anyone. Out of the company's CSR budget, which I said hypothetically, because we heard Axis Bank this afternoon, they have a CSR budget of 1 crore. So 5% means 5 lakhs. That 5 lakhs it can use for any kind of capacity building, either capacity building of its own foundation staff, or the partner NGO, or the local communities.
But can it not go beyond 5% if you're doing it for
But
local
that
communities?
can be other projects, no? It's skill building projects, etc. There is a whole bunch of money to be used for all that.
Just want to check, is there any provision for disability? Because now there is a new department and all.
Under preventive healthcare, you would go there.
There's nothing clear for disability?
Differently abled, it's there.
No, it's no more.
One second. Healthcare, including preventive healthcare, sanitation.
The next one.
Number 2, yeah, okay. Yeah, differently able. There you are. Here you are. Point number 2 in Schedule 7. Yeah, the clarifications also speak about you can give calipers and all those kinds of things. All right. The companies more. Any companies have been left out because this is essentially your session. So the companies have any more questions? Because the NGOs will have it till the cows come home. All right. If you are finished, then yes, I saw a hand at the back. Yes.
So you said like 5 lakhs, for instance, that example. But what if a consulting company wants to give their people and their entire budget is 1 crore? Can they allocate all their that money towards?
There are ways in which you can weave a consulting firm within your project. You can build it into the project, where part of the project is also monitoring and evaluation. So build it into the project. For that you need private consultations, not in a Q&A answer session. But we can build into it, certainly. Let me give you that as a broad sweep, that put M&E as part of the project. You cannot be thinking in terms of a good CSR program or project without building the M&E component into it. That's for sure. And anybody would understand that. So build it into your project.
So my question was on due diligence. So under the CSR Act, is there anything that we need to be ready, or is there something that's sort of new or out of the usual
You are asking
questions?
this as an NGO.
As an NGO, is there something that we need to be ready with to present under the CSR Act that would be different than other
The
general
Companies
questions?
Act and the rules have not put on any norms in terms of due diligence. So each company will have its own due diligence kind of tools and mechanisms. So Axis Bank was sharing with us this afternoon a very elaborate system that they have, an extremely robust one. But they say which they use in a very phased manner, because it can be very inundating for smaller startup NGOs, etc. So each organization will have its own due diligence system. So there's no straitjacketing that. Each company, depending on the funds it's giving out, so let's say for a small outlays, it may be just bare minimal. But if it is giving you something like 50 lakhs of rupees, technically, the due diligence process may be much more elaborate. All right? Yes.
So my question was around restrictions on funding for-profit entities. So
yes, I mean, the rules say that a company can carry out its CSR on its own as a company through its own CSR staff, through its foundation, or through a registered trust, society, or a Section 8 company. It doesn't speak of a for-profit company. So therefore, the question arises around social enterprises, which are sometimes for-profit and sometimes non-profit. The way I look at it as the law standing now, for-profit social enterprises is high-risk investment from a CSR angle right now. As in, it's not, but at the same time, as I always interpret legally, that it is not specifically debarred either. The position in law being, and which I was saying earlier to all of you coming in, is that what is not specifically disallowed is automatically allowed. So in the absence of the law saying you cannot fund for-profit entities, if you're doing something substantially socially good, there's a good chance we can implement CSR activities through a for-profit, but it would entail an element of risk for the company. And it depends on the risk-taking capacity of the company to invest in a for-profit social enterprise. That's how I would put it. Especially because the rules clearly say, how can CSR be implemented? Through your company, through your company's foundation, or any trust, society, or a company which is 3-year active. It doesn't speak about for-profit company. But having said that, there are various negative lists of what is not CSR. So they say supporting a marathon is not CSR. Giving money outside of India, they have not said giving to a for-profit enterprise is not CSR, not yet. And therefore, my legal interpretation would be, it's not specifically disallowed, therefore it can be allowed. But it's an element of risk. That's how I would put it. Does that answer your question? Anyone else? It's 5 o'clock. Yes.
Is there going to be a rush for toilets? Having the Prime
You
Minister...
mean after this program? Yes.
No, for the CSR.
Just kidding, just kidding. Yes, sanitation has been covered.
Yeah.
As you can see over there. Sanitation.
Has the Prime Minister's announcement about toilets?
Yes,
in
I'm aware
schools,
of that.
will
And
there be
also
a-
slums. And also slums. It was mentioned in the Finance Act that slum development should be part of CSR. That was part of the budget speech in Parliament recently.
How influential is that going to be in CSR spend? I mean, corporate spending their CSR money?
Corporates will spend according to,
Yeah.
end of the day, let's face it, a company will do CSR, a good company, as long as what it wants to do is aligned to its business interests. End of the day, it has to see whether it's adding to its branding. It is creating good neighborlyhoodness. So here is a factory, it wants to work with communities to, I won't say appease them, but to create good relationship with the environment around it. Those will be the parameters and not things like what you spoke about.